go into the room. When I turned it on, then of course I was glued. I could not watch it. I got really emotional, and the kids didn't understand it, of course. So I just said something bad, really bad is happening, and it was hard, and they were worried because their dad wasn't there. And that was a little scary for them.
I think in times like that your instinct is to try to sort of cling to what's normal. I felt a great desire to keep an atmosphere of calm. I felt a great responsibility to show them an example of someone who was not going to fall apart. Because I felt that if, there's nothing scarier. They're only 13 and 14 years old, and there's nothing scarier, I think, than being in a scary situation and seeing that an adult who is supposed to be in charge is really scared. But on the other hand, I was terrified. I mean, deep down, I was terrified. And at the time, I was 5 months pregnant, and I remember, I just remember being very conscious of that. And I remember saying to my class, actually, I want you all to know that we're all perfectly safe. Believe me. I'm carrying very precious cargo. And if I thought we were in danger, I would leave. We would be leaving. And I said that even though I think I did feel in danger, because we had no idea what was going on. There were days when I thought that maybe I would take a leave of absence, but I ended up deciding that probably we're okay, and that I just sort of needed to trust the way that I felt. And the fact is that I didn't feel sick. It was very gross and smelled horrible walking from the subway to school, but I never had a sore throat. Never got a headache. I felt fine. And I think I had to trust that. Well, it's funny because for the first 3 months, I would say, after the attack, so throughout November, for all September, October, November, I felt actively sort of an active sense of fear every day that I think everyone felt. And then one day I just sort of felt less afraid. But during that time of feeling afraid, I felt like I was crazy to be in New York. And I know people who have children especially felt a strong desire or considered more actively than some other people, people that don't have children, considered more actively leaving New York. And I had lots of conversations with my friends about whether or not we would consider, just completely changing our lives and leaving New York. So far, I don't know anyone who's done that. But do I plan to raise my child in New York? Yes. I love New York, and I believe that if my husband, my baby, and I were to move to, I don't know, where to go, the country? Actually, I think we would move to Western Massachusetts if we were going to move to a totally different life. But then, what has happened to you is you allowed your life to be completely defined by one event. I would always know that when I was 31 years old, I had a baby, and I moved to the country, and I left my whole life behind because of this terrorist attack. And I think it's a really problematic thing to allow your life to be defined by one event. I do think, I've always found New York to be a very friendly place. I feel like there's this weird myth about New York being really unfriendly. I'm from Boston, and Boston is unfriendly. New York is not unfriendly. You always have sort of encounters with people on the street, and I've always felt the same way, like everywhere in the world, in cities, people really bond together when something disastrous happens, like there's a tornado or a blizzard, when something big happens. And then all of a sudden, everyone is really nice to each other on the streets or whatever, and I've always felt that New York was in sort of a constant state of disaster. So there was always this feeling that we were sort of in something together. And in a way, New Yorkers are very well equipped to handle something like what happened on September 11th. Because we're used to feeling like we're in this sort of state of crisis, It was just a much worse state of crisis than normal. I guess I do think people show each other more kindness, and I felt like this year more people wished me a Happy New Year, for instance, than normal, like cab drivers and people in stores. I really believe in healing, and I believe that the city will be healed. I think you have to believe that.
On that morning,
Square right afterwards, and it was just the most amazing experience. Like, it just gave me so much faith in New York. I was almost more like nostalgic, but optimistic and hopeful and forgiving and trusting in people than I ever thought anyone could be in this situation. And I don't know, it was like everything that was missing from New York was suddenly back there again. And before, I was always thinking, oh, I'm leaving for college, I'm never coming back here, like I'm gonna move to a nice clean city where everybody likes each other. But after this, I just realized that, like, no matter how far I go, I always have to come back here because the feeling that I've gotten within the last 3 months has been an irreplaceable one. Every time I walked down 6th Avenue and I saw the empty space, I would start to cry a little bit. And every time I saw someone with an American flag, I would feel a little bit better. I'm not like a major nationalist or anything. It doesn't even mean nationalism to me. To me, it means like spirit and like pride. Not necessarily just in your country, but pride in yourself as a person and as a community. In the flag ceremony, I got to be the United States, which was a lot of fun. Everyone who carried all the flags was awesome, and everyone was really into it, so it was really just a nice ceremony in general. I was very happy that I got to kind of represent America, partially just because I don't really identify with any other nation. I'm a mix of everything, so I couldn't have really attributed myself to anything besides America, but it was just a good feeling to be able to think to myself, even if only to myself, that I was like some part of the American spirit, whatever that is. I didn't really get to hear the speakers and stuff because they lined all of us up in alphabetical order, and I was you, so I was all the way over there. But I know that the mayor was there, and I know that he did a really good job because that's what people said. Well, the part about the ceremony that was just so good for me was like everybody being together and everybody genuinely wanting to do it. Like, people volunteered their time to be a part of this thing that involved us walking all the way down to the Battery in the freezing cold, carrying these huge flags, because they wanted to be a part of this uniting of everyone who had been affected by it. And I don't know if people looked into it that much or that ideologically, but people wanted to represent their countries, and people wanted to be a part of something that had affected them as a school. I think it meant a lot to people that we were asked to carry the flags, just because there's been a lot of recognition about the school, but this was a little bit more than that. Like, we were so close that we deserved to have a hand in it because we were a part of it too. And we were commemorating all the people who had been lost, and it was really beautiful. Everyone was so happy and smiley, even though it was a sad thing because we were commemorating 3 months after September 11th. It was just, the park was so nice and it was beautiful, and we put up our flags, and it was just these 82 flags going around this dead type thing in front of a garden, and it just reminded you that, like, regardless of what had happened a half mile up, there were still beautiful things above and beautiful things below, and soon there would be beautiful things there too. And it was just a good feeling to have everybody together and have everybody commemorating the event without having to be so sad. With hope and with remembrance, and again with hope and optimism for what was to come, and not a negative attitude about what had happened, but more of a positive attitude about what would happen.
I went to my first class, and this is about 9:15 at this point, and my teacher told us, he's like,